If we know, then we must fight for your life as though it were our own, which it is, and render impassable with our bodies the corridor to the gas chamber. For if they take you in the morning, they will be coming for us that night. There are a lot of things that divide us as a people, and that's not inherently bad. It's just how people are. Same as every social creature in nature. We develop complex enough brains that everyone is different, continuously molded into form by every interaction you'll ever have. And as people, we have a strong desire to split into groups, which isn't inherently bad either. The family unit was necessary throughout evolution, as it is now. As societies grow into larger structures, so do the groups you associate with. Villages fought for each other, towns fought with each other, kingdoms fight with each other, nations fight with each other. You can apply a moral judgment to it, but when you put enough people in an area for long enough, conflict will arise eventually and factions will form along those lines. But what happens when people in power use this human quality to their advantage? To keep people fighting among each other so they can't realize the strength held in numbers. Well, then you have a problem. Even though enslaved Africans were brought into Jamestown, Virginia in 1619, the enslavement of black people was not their main labor source until later in the 1600s into the 1700s. Why is that? Let me set the scene. In Jamestown, few people amassed most of the wealth and power quickly through indentured servitude. Indentured servitude is where people from England would come to the colony on a contract, and there were way more of them than enslaved Africans. This contract had the servants working for a planter for a certain amount of time, usually 3 to 7 years. During this time, they'd live on the farm and not have many freedoms outside of that. After the contract, they'd be given freedom and given land to work on. Sounds like a good deal, right? In a vacuum, it could be. I'm sure it was good for somebody, but most people still ended up destitute or barely scraping by. Why is that? Well, first off, a lot of people just died before their contract was up, especially in the early years. In the first 19 years of the colony, well over half of the people who immigrated from England died. A lot of diseases passed around on the ships and in the colonies. Dysentery, typhoid fever, tuberculosis, malaria, and syphilis were all big. Most people lacked food and clean water, making them die even more from the diseases. The death rates dropped as the colony got more established, but the conditions still weren't good. Even when they did survive, the planters didn't keep up their end of the bargain. Land wasn't scarce, especially at first, but it was hoarded. Each planter was given 50 acres of land, or about 43 football fields, for each indentured servant that they brought over. And of course, having more land gives opportunity for more people to work on it. So you see how this formula led to a few people sitting at the top, with most of the land and most of the wealth. In addition, the planters grew a monoculture of tobacco to send back to England. The thing about tobacco is it depletes the soil quickly, especially in large quantities, and they were growing a lot. So you constantly need new land. Do you think the planters wanted to give this money to poor people? Nah, they was trying to keep it. So a lot of times, when people got out of the contract, they had to keep working for the same guy to scrape by. And the people were fed up. They were tired of it. And what happens when everybody's pissed off and they have nothing to lose? Rebellion. Enter Nathaniel Bacon. He arrived in Virginia in 1674 and had a seat on the governmental council within a year of coming to the colony. He wanted to expand the colony outward, but the government was trying to avoid more conflict with the Powhatan Federation because they got bodied last time. Nathaniel Bacon wasn't down with that. He was by no means poor himself, but he could speak to the poor people in the colony. He understood their frustrations and related to them, and he could make it into action. So in 1676, it sparked into a full rebellion. The indentured servants, enslaved people, and poor free farmers of the colony banded together into what is called the Giddy Multitude. They started off by attacking the Powhatan Federation and driving them off land. However, it soon expanded into more than that. They turned their eye towards the government of Virginia and lit the capital on fire. The rebellion fell into a whisper because Bacon died of dysentery, but it still scared the people in charge, because there were vastly more poor people. If they couldn't stop the capital from burning this time, who knows about next time? And that's when I started putting emphasis on racial segregation and leaning more heavily on the enslavement of Africans. If you convince white poor people that they're better than black poor people, they'll start looking through the lens of white supremacy rather than class solidarity. And if they can't cooperate, they can't dismantle the power structure already in place. So many people have talked about political polarization, at this point it's cliche. There are thousands of think pieces about it, it's usually annoying as hell. I would know. While researching, I started a lot of videos that I did not finish because they were not saying anything. But it doesn't have to be this way as long as you have a point, and I do, so please stick with me. Political polarization is a term meaning that people's political beliefs are getting more and more extreme on average. A lot branches out from this. On a personal level, people with differing political views are less likely to listen to each other. On a structural level, it means legislators are doing less because they're compromising less across party lines, because there's less overlap in their ideologies, or at least the ideologies that they have to stick to if they want to get reelected. It's an outcropping of that factionalism I was talking about earlier. Now, a lot of people stop here and just blame it on social media echo chambers or whatever party they don't like, but I wanted to dig deeper. Everything's a response to something, and this is no exception. There really just used to be more overlap in conservative and liberal ideology within the parties. There were conservative Democrats and liberal Republicans. How did we get here? Democrats were the pro-slavery party. It feels weird now, but the South really rode for the Democrats for a long time, up until the 60s. And what decided this? Lyndon B. Johnson running in 1964. He was vocal with his intention to pass civil rights laws and it turned a lot of people off. This is called de-alignment, where a party does something that separates the voter base from it. His Republican opponent was named Barry Goldwater. He saw an opportunity. See, a lot of racists don't want to think of themselves as racist, and it's been that way for a while. What Goldwater did is he used states' rights excuse to appeal to overt and covert racists at the same time. He used a dog whistle. He's not pro-segregation, he just thinks it should be up to the states. But do you think Georgia would desegregate? What about Mississippi? Or South Carolina? Goldwater didn't win, not by a long shot. You know where he did win? The Deep South. And Arizona for reasons that I don't actually have time to research. This planted a seed. Racists in the South, previously Democrat strongholds, started moving Republican. This is called realignment, where that disaffected voter base goes to a different party. The people in the parties rearrange. Some would argue this is inevitable at some point. The two-party system makes it so that you frame your worldview between two choices, so it makes sense to pick one and align strongly. There are other reasons as well, but I'm short for time, but I still haven't said anything very noteworthy, have I? Through the 50s and 60s, the FBI had a program called COINTELPRO, a shortened version of counterintelligence program. I know, creative naming. Their job was to infiltrate and dismantle groups considered a threat to the government. It started with the Communist Party and expanded into many other groups, like the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party and what were labeled black extremist groups. One such group was the Black Panther Party. I don't have time to do the Black Panthers justice here, so I'll keep it brief. The Black Panther Party for Self-Defense was a group started in Oakland, California, to seek to improve the plight of black people. They did this through armed patrols to protect black communities from the government and terrorism, but also through volunteer programs like free breakfast, health clinics, and education. We'll leave it there. Fred Hampton was a leader in the Chicago chapter of the Black Panther Party. You know what they called him? The Black Messiah. He brought people together. The Rainbow Coalition was an alignment of many different groups with the knowledge that to make things better for anyone, we gotta work together. It expanded quickly, but it started with three groups: the Black Panthers, the Young Lords, a Puerto Rican gang that turned to activism, and the Young Patriots Organization, a Southern pride group from Appalachia who used the Confederate flag as a symbol. Fred Hampton was able to bring these people together and make something magical. In 1969. And guess what year he was killed? 1969. At 21 years old. Imagine what could have come next. Just imagine. Once you start building bridges like that, they gotta merge you. When Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. started leaning into tearing down capitalism and speaking to poor white folk, guess what they did to him too? So much wealth is concentrated into so few hands in this country. The bottom 80% of people control 10% of the wealth. The top 1% controls 36% of the wealth. And that's why they don't want us to unify. There's strength in numbers. It's cliche because it's true. According to the US Census reports, there are 331,893,745 people currently living within the United States. 80% of that is 266 million. With those numbers, you can do anything. Angela Davis gave a speech in 1969 where she linked the Vietnam War to oppression in the US, because it comes from the same root. The same structures oppressing people here are oppressing people abroad. She says in that speech, "We are facing a common enemy, and that enemy is Yankee imperialism, which is killing us both here and abroad." All of our struggles for civil rights are linked. It's the same government oppressing all of us. It's the same system of capitalism oppressing all of us. It's the same government enacting violence on black people, on women, on disabled people, on immigrants, and on the world.